And okay, okay, so welcome everyone. I'm still waiting for some people to come on board, but those who are here, hi and welcome. Today's webinar, we have Director of ACS Certification Henry Louey with us today, and he's going to talk to you about why a professional certification is essential to an IT professional's career growth. And also we have Johnny Serrano, who is the Global Information Systems Lead at GroundProbe. GroundProbe just recently won the Australian Financial Review's Best Product Innovation and Best Overall Innovation at the AFR, so Australian Financial Review's Most Innovative Companies Award. So that's awesome, awesome accolades there. And Johnny is also an ACS certified professional in cybersecurity. So without further ado, I will hand you over to Henry and Johnny to share with you, the reasons why certification is essential to your career trajectory. Thanks. Over to you, Henry.
Great. Look, thanks so much, Kylie, and thanks, Johnny, for giving up your lunch hour. So I do appreciate it.
No worries.
So in relation to this presentation, for those that look at YouTube and look at late night shows, particularly those like Jimmy Kimmel or James Corden, wanted to make this a little bit more interactive, and I'll introduce Johnny very shortly. But in relation to this presentation, rather than just hearing it from myself and talking about from ACS's perspective the value of ACS certification, I thought, particularly for this webinar, is actually that we actually hear from the horse's mouth. Sorry for calling you that, Johnny. You're not a horse, but we're hearing it from our client's perspective in relation to what were the drivers around certification, what chose you to actually partner and engage with ACS, etc. Now, from a question and answers perspective, love questions. I actually absolutely welcome them. However, for this presentation, what we might do, Kylie, is we'll keep track of the Q&As that are coming through Zoom, but we'll make sure that each one actually gets addressed towards the end itself. So, as I said, I'm the director of ACS professional certifications for the Australian Computer Society. And for the agenda today, it's just really to find out a little bit about myself. We talk about knowledge and skills a lot, and I really just wanted to sort of highlight the difference between an ACS certification as opposed to the vast number of certifications that are out there from various certification bodies. So the Certified Ethical Hacker, the Cisco CCNA, the Microsoft MCSE. There's quite a number out there. I really wanted to sort of just to highlight in a high level view the differences between what we offer and what's actually available in the industry. We obviously want to benchmark certification. So how does actually ACS assess and how does actually ACS benchmark the applicants against industry frameworks? We talk through about ACS certification itself, pathways to certifications, as well as what we call your T-shaped or your breadth of ICT knowledge. Then, very special guest, but David, in fact, I would love you to not just actually wait until that point to actually talk about yourself, the company, and certification. But we introduced David we introduced Dave. I've got the wrong slide presentation. Yeah. My apologies. Yes, we introduced Johnny from.
You're right.
I'm going to slap myself there. We're going to introduce Johnny from GroundProbe, and Johnny's going to talk about his company and what we talk about with ACS. And as said, Johnny and I owe you a beer or three after this. We love you to actually just to interject whenever you feel relevant throughout the presentation. And interesting enough, Johnny actually is an ACS certified professional with cybersecurity. And I actually want to talk through the actual ACS certification specialisms. And in fact, Johnny's actually really interesting in that you've been through the whole pathway, haven't you, Johnny? You actually started certified technologist and went all the way through.
Yeah, that's right, mate. So I've been a member since 2010. So over 8 years now, and I started off as a technologist and worked my way through that. And I guess the thing about this, I've been through the process with the CP, and then also the cybersecurity, is I always found the ease of and the hassle-free process of going through getting certified, and I was able to provide documentation at my leisure. Sometimes you're very busy, And on top of that, I always got feedback in saying, well, you still need these things in order to meet the next level. Have you thought about that next level? These are things that you can do.
So not only were we a certification body first and foremost, but also helped you from a professional development perspective, and particularly as we actually saw you actually growing your career over the last 8 years or so.
Yeah, that's right, mate. So obviously from a CT to a CP to the senior CP that you have, but also then, as you've said just then before, you now do the cybersecurity, which is, I think, is a really big and great initiative in our industry.
Look, fantastic, and thank you so much for those kind words, Johnny. So, just myself, just a little bit of self-deprecation there. So, for anyone that actually knows Les Miserables, you've probably heard of the song. Yeah, let's not go there. But so I'm not John Valjean. The main thing is I've been in the ICT industry for probably close to 30 years now. So I started off as an analyst programmer with Telstra, worked in a whole variety of mainframes, COBOL, networking type of space, and then moved into different areas, service delivery, technical pre-sales as a systems engineer. Found my calling really around technical instruction. So for any of, I will say the old timers out there, if anyone remembers the old certified Novell engineer, I was a CNI with Novell, and also must have done something right because I was asked to become the education manager for Novell for Asia Pacific in the late 1990s, early 2000s. And then obviously became certification director, not just for ACS, but for another company called CompTIA. If anyone's really, really fascinated or really wants to find more of my background, I'm on LinkedIn. You can just search me for Henry Louey. I'm the only one actually on LinkedIn, and you can find a little bit more about my background from there. Probably the main important thing, though, is that I've been a supporter of the ICT industry and industry certification pretty much from day zero, and I got my start from certifications actually with the Novell CNE. Johnny, you made a really interesting point where you said, and I don't want the audience that are actually on this webinar to think that the process itself is easy in inverted commas. So yep. you made a great comment where you said, look, the feedback we got from ACS, and I found the process itself was quite straightforward. This actually aligns really well with the slide here around knowledge versus skill. So when we talk about knowledge, there are some very, very good vendors and very, very good assessment bodies from Pearson VUE, Sylvan Prometric, ISC Squared, ISACA. They all have their own knowledge-based examinations, whether you're doing a certification around project management, around PMBOK, or whether you're doing something around service management, around ITIL. You generally find that there's quite a lot of certification bodies that can give you that assessment of the knowledge. ACS certification is a little bit different in that what we look at is not necessarily to reinforce that you actually know ITIL or you know PMBOK or that you know your Cisco proficiencies. What we're looking for particularly is actually how you apply your knowledge in the workforce. So for example, if I'm a computer programmer, what does that mean? Does that mean that I'm a junior developer working on very small projects, or that I'm working in an agile environment as a lead programmer, responsible for the daily stand-ups? So the knowledge itself, whilst it's important, plays a very important role, and what we do is actually to play a very important role of providing context of actually how you apply that that knowledge. And that's actually what
Sorry, Henry. Yeah, I think just on that as well, I think, a lot of those vendor certifications sort of prove from a technical point of view that you're capable and you can do certain things. But I guess in the workforce, and there are other skills, to put things together, your soft skills, your communication skills, as well as being able to, I guess, from a project management point of view, actually go through a project and go through the actual issues that you go through to make it successful. Whereas in the vendor accreditation, it's really just a theory. So I think that those are the type of things that this certification also verifies.
Yeah, and I know that, and we'll come to it when we look at pathways, but one of the key criteria and key requirements for an ACS certification is actually having demonstrated industry experience. So you might have all, in inverted commas, the paper qualifications and certifications, but if you've never actually applied it in the workforce, then ACS, we can't certify you at that point in your career. And that's something that's very important too.
I think it also, Henry, from a from the, I guess, an employer's point of view, it also builds trust. And, you know, if we see someone that has that accreditation, you know, they're at a certain level and they've been verified, and it just starts to create that trust within the IT industry as well.
Yeah, in fact, you're right, Johnny. That actually raises you made a really good point, because more and more corporations, particularly in federal government, defence, are now asking for people to be validated on their skills, and particularly being validated against an industry benchmarks, which actually is a good segue to this next slide, which is, how does ACS actually benchmark or assess the application of knowledge for people actually going through ACS assessment? So ACS, when they developed the certification, looked at a whole range of different industry benchmarks or industry frameworks in relation to ICT. And they settled on one called SOPHIA, or what's called the Skills Framework for the Information Age. In very simple terms, don't want you to try to squint your eyes and read through all of them, but in very simple terms, SOPHIA lists, well, actually 104 skills now, but this is actually the previous version of SOPHIA. SOPHIA lists 97 technical skills, broken up into different categories, ranging from strategy and architecture, change and transformation, development, implementation, delivery and operation, skills and quality, and relationship and engagement. So it's a really good way for individuals to I suppose, align the skills that they have in their career and be able to have those skills actually benchmarked against a framework towards certification for ACS. So again, this is not an introduction to SOPHIA course, but in very simple terms, what we look at in ACS is that we benchmark our certification around the skills framework. For an individual, for example, let's say, for example, I'm a Java programmer. You'll find that in the middle of the SOPHIA chart around development and implementation, you'll find probably most of my skills, if I was a programmer, would be actually focused on that area. That's things right. Like programming or testing, as an example. If I work in, let's say, for example, service management, you'll find that a lot of my skills will then be around that delivery and operation, which is that brown in SOPHIA. So that's your release and deployment, that's your application support, that's your service level management, as example. So you'll find that SOPHIA is a really good way of actually grouping skills, and we as ACS and my assessors use it as the basis of actually applying what skills you have as someone submitting for certification, and more importantly, what level, which actually then goes back to the next slide. So SOPHIA talks about a number of skills that we work in IT, but it then actually talks about, or then actually will align to what level of responsibility that you're applying that skill. So if you remember, about 5 minutes ago, I talked around, I have a proficiency, for example, like programming. So that tells me a lot and says that, you know, I have some technical skills around, maybe it's COBOL or Java or C#, but it doesn't really tell me how I actually apply it. And this is where using the second layer, or the second part of SOPHIA, looks at, I have a skill, how do I actually apply it as a level of responsibility? So as a, you know, for example, as a Java programmer, as a junior developer, I might have a very low level of responsibility, and that is aligned to SOPHIA, or I might actually have quite a high level of autonomy and responsibility, and that corresponds to a higher level within the skills framework. So to put that into example, let's have a look at one of the SOPHIA skills. So SOPHIA, as I mentioned, I'm just going back 2 slides. SOPHIA, as I mentioned, has, you know, quite a number of skills. And you'll actually find that we have probably about, at least a dozen skills that are related to security, cybersecurity, information security. But if I look at one skill in particular, one is called SCTY, which is the SOPHIA term. This is the skill for information security. So information security is a skill that's available in the skills framework for the information age. And as I talked about in this slide, it talks about that you can apply that skill to a number of levels of responsibility. So as an example, if I had information security at level 7, and that was actually what I was validated against from my assessors, it would say that I have direct I direct the development, implementation, delivery, and support of an enterprise information security strategy aligned to my business. In other words, so Johnny, I'm the CIO, or I'm the CEO, or I'm the MD. You tend to find that you've got the top level, a responsibility for that particular skill. Level 6, however, says that you develop and communicate corporate information security policy standards and guidelines and contribute to the development of the organizational strategies that address information control. So this is where you, from a hierarchical perspective, you don't have organizational responsibility, but you would contribute to the organization's information security policy. Still a very high level of responsibility, by the way. We're talking directors, senior directors, etc., manager directors at that particular level. But that's typically what you find with level 6. Level 5 is that you provide advice and guidance on security strategies to manage identified risks and ensure adoption of the standards. So in other words, someone working at level 5 is still working at quite a senior role, but their role is to not enforce, that's actually a really bad term, but they're there to promote the valid use of information security policy and be the subject matter expert within the organization for people that come across it. So the point I'm trying to make is that just because you have a skill doesn't tell a potential employer, doesn't necessarily tell your colleagues how you're actually applying it. And having the validation of the level of responsibility is actually really important. And as you can see, the skill itself, depending on what level you are, a level 7, level 6, or a level 5, even if it's the same skill, does actually have a very different way of actually being viewed.
And Henry, I really think on this one here, those different levels, sometimes it's a little difficult to sort of say where you think you are. And I guess this is where, when you're going through the process, and the assessor can also give you that feedback and with the documentation you provide to tell you and sort of make it a little bit more clearer on certain different levels, just like you've explained there.
That's correct. And, and bless their hearts, because I remember I was an undergraduate at times too. I find that if someone who is a recent graduate, you might be doing some very senior projects within your undergraduate studies. You might be doing some capstone projects, but that doesn't mean that you are a level 5 or a level 6.
Exactly right. Yeah.
What you'll find is, going back to Sophia, is that from an ACS perspective, if you've done a degree with ACS that's accredited with the Australian Computer Society, you should be exiting at level 3, which is to be able to apply the skills that you have learned at university into the workforce. At the very lowest level, by the way, level 1, which I would imagine no one in this webinar would actually be working under. Level 1 is that typically your work experience criteria. You've come in and you're working for a particular organization for a week. They will get you to do some very, I'd say, process-driven tasks. So, for example, unbox computers, set them up, wait for further instruction. Whereas typically what we find in IT is that you tend to work from level 3 through levels 5, 6, or 7. The point I want to make, by the way, even though Johnny, you've had this rapid uptake in the last 8 or so years, it's not a ladder. So the majority of our members tend to work within that level 3 through level 5 band and having very successful and comfortable careers in ICT. So, I have absolutely no career aspirations to work at level 7, but that doesn't mean that my next door neighbor won't. So don't see Sophia as actually being a ladder. It is just a way of actually validating what level of responsibility you're working in your job role.
Yeah, that's right.
So to put that together, before I look into the other aspects of ACS certification, ACS certification provides the same recognition afforded to other professional disciplines such as accounting, engineering, and law. So for those that actually have the ACS certified CP or CT, we are actually recognised by Professional Standards Council and actually recognised by Professionals Australia as a profession. That's actually really important. We provide 2 levels of professional certification: the Certified Technologist, which is aligned to the Sophia framework level 3, and the Certified Professional, which is aligned to the Sophia level 5. So before I go into the nuts and bolts of what the pathways are, in very simple terms, if you front up for an assessment and the assessors look at your level of responsibility, if you're banding at level 3 or 4, you would meet the criteria to possibly be recognized or assessed as a certified technologist. If you're banding at levels 5, 6, or 7, you may meet the criteria for actually being assessed as a certified professional. Now, interesting that I say may, not you will, because there's actually quite a number of other aspects that we look at the assessment that also is applied to the actual individual, which we'll cover off right now. So from the assessment and looking at the guidelines, just very simply, this, by the way, is all available on the ACS website if you're interested, so for further information. But it's based on the skills framework for the information age. And the reason why we chose the skills framework and chose an international framework is that if there's no way for ACS to be able to even out all the different job roles that are available. So for example, you might be a junior program manager or project manager for a large government organization. But even as a junior, your billings or your total project budgets might be measured in the millions, 2, 3, 4 million, but they consider them to be small projects. Working for an SME, that same job role may actually be a senior project manager in another organization. So the way Sophia works is it's actually very prescriptive in respect to your responsibility. So it even outs the playing field a lot. And that's actually something that is very important, because you might think, well, I work for a small company. Am I actually being handicapped because of that? And the answer is no, absolutely not. Sophia actually does allow you to actually what's the word for, even out the actual playing field as such.
Henry, just another quick point here. With the certification, the certification you get from the ACS is also valid internationally. Is that right?
Oh, yeah. And I didn't even, what's the word for it? I didn't even cue you to actually ask that question. You're exactly right. Yeah. So we're a member of what's called IP3, International Professional, and I can't remember the other body, but IP3 is it's an international practice of computer associations as such, and our certifications are recognised within the United Kingdom, within Canada, within a whole number of actual professional bodies. Also, too, Sophia, when you actually have your validation of Sophia level 3 or level 5 or higher, that's actually recognised by any organisation that actually chooses to adopt the Sophia's framework. Be careful. We use Sophia towards the end result of the certification. So it's a little bit more complex than that, but exactly right, David. Yeah, our certifications themselves are actually recognised internationally. And in fact, we had a customer from Ballarat, of all places, Ballarat-based hospital. He was Scottish. His wife wanted to go back into Glasgow, and his actual certification got him or helped him to actually secure a job in Scotland, because they understood Sophia and actually understood what that actually meant for him on his application. So we see countless examples of that happening quite often. Yeah, and in fact, from a certification standpoint, we've got certifications or people with certified professional all over the world, from the United Kingdom, from New York City, right through to the Middle East, into South America. So certifications around everywhere. Okay, to go back to that, so it's based on the Sophia framework. A candidate's assessed against not only your the level of responsibility and the technical skills, but also too that you have been working on a particular skill or have that level of skill for at least 2 years. So in other words, you don't want to, just because you've actually submitted your first change request in service delivery doesn't mean that you're proficient on that skill. So we're really looking for that length, and you're laughing there, David. Yeah, it's important to actually obviously have that demonstrated experience actually working for the skill itself. Adhere to the ACS Code of Ethics. A candidate also needs to display or show a breadth of ICT knowledge. So this is something that we'll talk about in a future slide, but it talks about not just only having strong technical skills, but also having a good overall breadth of ICT knowledge as well. And also too, having worked in the ICT industry for a minimum number of years. So the duration is actually based on the highest level of qualification the actual individual owns. So we talk about this T-shaped skills, and I just love this little diagram. So you know, I've just realised we can't actually edit out this webinar. It's actually going to make what's the word? An unpleasant comment about certain TV shows that I suppose highlight IT professionals in a poor way. They tend to look at IT professionals as like propeller heads, and they only focus on the technical proficiencies that those IT people actually have. But we know, for everyone that actually is in this webinar, that the technical proficiencies are very important, but also understanding the other facets of the business are just as important. So having, strong T-shaped skills of having technical proficiencies with an overall breadth of knowledge is really important. And from ACS's perspective, we have what's called the CBOK, the core body of knowledge. And the core body of knowledge itself looks at 20 knowledge areas that are essential to someone having a good all-round skills within ICT. So in other words, don't just look at people like propeller heads. You know that we actually have more skills than that, and particularly very strong business skills related to the actual technology. The ACS Code of Ethics, this is actually on our website, and also as all ACS members and for people on this webinar, you probably would have seen these as well. The primacy of the public interest, enhancement of quality of life, honesty, competence, professional development, which David, you've talked about, and how we always continue to develop, and also professionalism as well. Is core to what we do as certified professionals and certified technologists. These are, and again, sorry for actually squinting, but these are actually available on the ACS website as well, or Kylie can organise to send copies out to people are interested. But this is the pathways chart for certification. So as I mentioned, not only do you need to show proficiency within the number of years working in ICT experience, you also need to actually work the minimum number of years in ICT, depending on your highest level of qualification. So for example, if you've got, for a CT, if you have an ICT degree from an ACS recognised university, you need to have 1 year of industry experience before you're applicable to apply for certification. Conversely, if you've came in through osmosis and you don't have any vendor certifications, don't have industry, don't have any qualifications, then it's 7 years of experience as they go through, and also to aligning to a particular SOFIA skill. The same with certified professional. It varies from 3 years right through to 10 years, depending on the highest level of qualification you have. And again, I'm not going to go into each one of those, but if you have further questions, please see me or see Kylie afterwards, and we can actually go into that one in more depth. Okay. The best part, because I get to stop speaking for a little bit, and then we get to introduce Johnny. So I wanted to introduce Johnny. So Johnny's from GroundProbe. And he's the global, which actually sounds quite fancy there, Johnny. He's the global information systems lead with GroundProbe. But Johnny, maybe could we spend maybe just a couple of minutes talking about, well, firstly yourself, but also too, I'm interested in actually what GroundProbe do, and I'm more interested from your roles and responsibility of actually what you do as a global information systems lead.
Yeah, sure. So first off, I'll start with GroundProbe. So GroundProbe, we're a global technology leader that provides advanced hardware and software solutions to the mining industry, mostly targeted at mining safety. And I guess we go around 29 different countries around the world. It's an Australian company, started here in Brisbane out of research at a UQ in 2001. So we're not that old, but we've gone global. We have about 10 different offices around the world. And I guess the thing about GroundProbe is we're always looking to continually refine, improve our product range, so that we create disruptive technologies. And this has enabled us, I guess, as Kylie was saying before, about winning the, or coming first in the most innovative company in Australia and New Zealand in the AFR. About myself, as a global information systems lead, couple of titles there. I've got over 15 years of, I guess, IT experience. I started off as a programmer, as yourself, Henry, system administrator, and an ERP analyst, and now I manage the global team here at GroundProbe. Throughout my career, I've worked in many different industries, mining, obviously a software house, and also in defense. Used to look after the F111 project and those type of things. So the thing about me and my team is we're very agile, we're very fast moving, and we have a very fast, fail fast approach to things. We experiment with things, we try stuff out, and then we quickly fail, and move on. If it's a success, then we create a larger project out of that. So that's GroundProbe and me in a nutshell.
That's fantastic. It's interesting you mentioned about fail fast. So part of the thought leadership series that we have in ACS, and if you haven't already seen a lot of the interviews, we've got them all actually up on the ACS website. But last year, our CEO, Andrew Johnson, interviewed Mike Malone, and Mike was previously the owner of IINet, amazing internet services provider, great company. But Mike was actually of this premise where it's the 80% rule. If it's 80% there, release it to the customers because they will tell you what the other 20% is.
Right.
And it's really interesting that there are project managers or companies that won't take that risk. And it's almost like a waterfall environment where they will make sure that everything is complete before they release. What's the lesser of the two evils? And it's really interesting looking at thought leaders, for example, like Mike Malone, having that type of premise. And that made me look at how I did things in the past and thinking, oh, maybe I wasn't risk adverse. Maybe I should have actually taken that, or too risk adverse. Maybe I actually should have taken that leap. So it's really interesting.
In the current environment, I think it's just so much change and things are just changing so rapidly and you're getting so many disruptive technologies. I think if you take 2 to 3 years and to get it out to your customers, a lot has changed in that time. So they'll quickly tell you whether it's working or not.
Yeah. So, Johnny, how did you hear about the ACS, and what was your first involvement with the ACS?
Yeah, I was quite lucky that I actually had a former manager of mine sort of at the time sort of tell me, look, accountants have CPA and all these type of things, even though I had certifications and all these type of things that, getting together and showing me that I should become a member of the ACS just because of the events, I guess. And these are probably the reasons why I sort of chose to go through the process of being certified, because I could just see a lot of value for me there with also not just networking, but also there's certain materials available from the ACS. Like you've said on the website, you can go and get this information, the leadership series on top of that, but also I guess the events and sort of newer technologies, the River City Labs, the recent purchase or acquisition is another one. So, yeah.
It's interesting. You mentioned before where you said that from an assessment perspective that you found it quite straightforward, and I'm going to put words in your mouth. Well, actually, I'm not going to put words in your mouth because you actually said it, but you said it was easy, and I'm going to put that into context in that for those that for those that actually found the process quite straightforward, it's because you actually had that industry experience. We've actually had certifications where people who have got all the paper qualifications in the world, but actually have never worked a day in their life in IT. And, for them, it's actually very challenging. In fact, we actually had to decline the assessment because we actually couldn't go any further. So, but from an assessment perspective, Johnny, did you hear from ACS? Did you actually have to have anyone actually be a champion for you from a referee perspective? And did you actually ever speak to the actual assessor directly itself?
Yeah, actually I did. And I guess when you talked about those different levels, there's certain different levels where you think you might be at. And this is where the assessor sort of says, I probably need a little bit more evidence. Can you provide me real world examples? And also any referees that can provide examples or referee that you've actually completed those things. So you do get that feedback. But on top of that, for me, it's also interesting because there's a couple of things that I put forward that the assessor sort of said it's probably at a higher level, and if you provide these type of things, then you probably sit more under this. So it's that two-way feedback. I think is really important.
Yeah, and for the audience, Johnny, by the way, is not only a cybersecurity cybersecurity specialist, but also is what's called a Max, member of the Australian Computer Society, Senior, Max Senior. And you actually received your, I suppose, validation of your Max Senior actually through our assessment, because the assessors saw you actually working in some of your skills actually at level 6. So that might have come back through your conversation that they had, was saying, I think you're underselling yourself here, John.
That's right.
You send us some more information and we can actually validate you at a higher level.
And I think you were touching on that point before, like you got the level 5, level 6, level 7. Sometimes it's just hard to gauge where you think you do sit, and other times you may think you're actually higher than what it's not. So
yeah. Look, fantastic, fantastic. So speaking of cybersecurity, so we've talked up until this point about the general ACS certifications, which is the Certified Technologist and Certified Professional. Now, those certifications themselves are quite broad in that it does talk about the level of responsibility an applicant works at, but it doesn't, I suppose, align to a particular specialism in relation to your job role. So, last year, in September of 2017, we understood it as ACS is that we needed to look at offering different certifications based on your particular job role, whether it's actually a cybersecurity person, something around critical systems. So with the heightened awareness of the need to lift cyber resilience in Australia, a task force was headed by Dr. Jill Slay out of the University of New South Wales, and she established a global cybersecurity. She looked and reviewed many different cybersecurity frameworks and best practice to develop a best practice benchmark and certification around security. So we had Jill Slay from University of New South Wales, and for those that have security that are listening in the webinar, Jill is also a CISSP instructor, so from ISC Squared. Actually, you've got a CISSP yourself, don't you, Johnny?
CCNA.
CCNA?
Yeah, CCNAs and a couple of other accreditations as well, yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. So Mike Johnson from Macquarie University, Matt Warren from Deakin, Elena from the researcher at the Australian Centre for Cybersecurity, Kate Lundy, and Lieutenant Colonel Lisa Davidson. So they were the original body that actually developed the cybersecurity specialism.
Yeah, and I think this is a really important one because Henry, I've gone to. There's a lot of things out there in the media, especially in IT, and security is one of these things. And I guess now that we've got the new laws, it's starting to become more apparent how many breaches are probably happening quite regularly. And this, I think, is a way of meeting that skills gap that we have, and also trying to find a way in for people to. It's kind of hard sometimes trying to figure out which way do I go. There's always the ISACA accreditations, but I guess this is also another validation in security. Yeah, absolutely. So, so what's required? So the main thing is that you actually work in an IT cybersecurity or an IT security based role. So just because you might be an IT manager with some security responsibilities, that does not make you a cybersecurity specialist. And we picked that up very early on. So this is for someone who is recognised as I suppose, a leader within their respective organisations around security or cybersecurity, for a really good way of actually highlighting or seeing whether you actually are applicable. Go up to the Information Age and read our Spotlight on Cyber series. We actually have a whole range of articles of members who have been assessed or who have been awarded the cybersecurity specialism, and we're actually looking at their job roles and their impact of what they see in cybersecurity. Great series to actually read through. Have worked in ICT for a minimum number of years, as we've spoken about, particularly around cybersecurity. And this is the difference in that for a CP in cybersecurity, you have to be assessed at level 5 or higher on any 4 of the listed skills that are related to cybersecurity based on SOFIA. So that's around information, IT governance, information management, information security, information assurance, business risk management, pen testing, etc., etc. The rest is pretty straightforward. Demonstrating breadth of ICT knowledge, have an understanding and commitment to the ACS Code of Conduct. So the real difference is really that we're actually assessing more focused on your skills rather than just looking at a couple of skills for a standard assessment. We're actually focusing that you actually have the skills related to cybersecurity. That's right. So the other thing too is that, and Johnny, you actually made a really good question about recognition worldwide. Just like we have recognition for SOFIA and ACS certification across the globe, we've also worked with a number of large industry bodies. So for example, ISACA and ISC Squared. There's actually an MOU with ISACA and ISC Squared where we actually recognise the skills out of the certifications from, for example, like the Certified Information System Security Professional, the CISSP, or the Certified Information Security Manager, the CISM from ISACA.
if you have those certifications already, then we will give you a like-for-like equivalent for the skills as it applies to certification. This is unique in ACS in that we're actually recognizing vendor bodies and the outcomes of their assessment as it applies to our assessments, because we've looked at the way that they teach, the way that they assess their individuals, and we have a standing MOU between the two that if you have those that certification, then we already recognise the skills for you. And that's something unique with ACS that we have with this particular specialism, and it's fantastic to actually have. Funny enough, we have a lot of people who have their ISC squared and ISACA certifications still applying for ACS cybersecurity specialism because, as you said, Johnny, they really want to know where they are. Like,
That's right.
I'm over 5 and 6. They really actually want to know where their assessments are. Fantastic. So again, the roadmaps for certification, we've got the roadmap for CT and the roadmap for CP. Now, these are all available on the ACS website. The main thing to note is that this is a specialism and you are looking at a validation of at least 4 related skills in cybersecurity, whether you're actually a certified technologist or a certified professional. So that was launched in September, and that was the cybersecurity specialism. I just really want to just touch very briefly on the latest certification that we launched in May this year, which is around safety critical systems. So don't want to sound all doom and gloom, but if you've ever been like in an elevator and you ever wonder what happens if someone breaks the cable or cuts the cable, you're not going to plummet to your death because there's systems actually built in that will take over and safely drop you to the ground in those type of cases. The same with airlines. If someone, if you just can't break the cable to the wing flaps and the plane's going to come plummeting out of the sky, there's actually redundancy systems built in. These are all examples of what we call safety critical systems. So the ACS in May launched in conjunction with our special interest group around safety critical, the safety critical systems special interest group, the certification around safety critical systems. So we recognised that there was actually a need for it, and it was launched in May. So who actually made up the specialisms working group? Michael Johnson from Macquarie University, Elena from RGB Assurance, Luke from Siemens, Christine from Bushel Cornish, George from QR, and BJ from Nova Systems. These are all companies that actually work and specialise in safety critical systems. So the actual specialism itself was developed by our members and in conjunction with industry consultation as well. So people, for example, like the TELUS Group, Department of Defence, etc., all had input into the development of this specialism. So what does it mean to be a safety critical specialist? First up, you have to be a CP. So we look at your level of responsibility, which is actually determined through the Certified Professional Program. You need to have a related ICT or engineering degree, not because of academic preciousness, but because there's a lot of analytical knowledge around mathematics that is actually required around safety critical systems. So having a degree in IT is actually very important. And also having a practitioner level proficiency in 4 ACS safety critical systems units. Now, for this webinar, we're not going to go into it. If there's demand, I can actually do a whole webinar on safety critical systems itself, but I'll give you just a very quick example of what it means by safety critical unit. So this is I suppose the assessment summary chart. You need to be a certified professional to even begin the journey, have an ICT or an engineering equivalent qualification, and then do 4 of pick 4 units out of that listing of groups. 1 mandatory, which is the mandatory safety analysis. Then we have 1 unit out of safety management, another unit out of safety systems realization, and then finally 1 unit out of your supplemental experience. For those that went through university, that's like your what's the word for it? Your elective, that you can actually choose out of that blue segment. So this is just a really quick example of one. This is just pulled from the mandatory unit. So for someone who is going to be assessed for a safety critical system, then specialist, then can you define the scope of a hazard of a risk analysis, and from a practitioner level, examples of what they actually mean by that particular unit of competency. identifying hazards, again, whether from a practitioner level whether you have that or not. The actual assessment itself, Johnny, actually takes your assessment to the next level. And
Right.
the assessment itself is actually done through panel. So a key aspect for the applicant to be recognised as a specialist is that you actually will be panel assessed by a lead assessor, as well as then 2 peer assessors who are subject matter experts within the safety critical system. So imagine how if we were to put, say, cybersecurity as an example, and you actually being assessed by 2 CISSPs. So, but it's a very critical certification, and this is actually something that we absolutely thought is actually relevant. So again, to anyone who's actually interested in safety critical systems, please contact me afterwards, because again, we can do a whole webinar on this, because it's actually probably an hour of learning that goes through that process. But I'm just looking at the time. Just realised that it's a quarter to the ending hour. That wraps up the formal part of the actual presentation. And I wanted to again thank Johnny for actually being part of this presentation with us. But I do know, and I did realise that there was questions coming in and out. So Kylie, I haven't done this before, so can we maybe take some time to ask some questions or answer any questions?
Yep. There haven't been many questions coming through at all.
Okay.
Yeah, but we'll just wait for some more to come through. But there is one to Johnny.
Yep.
Johnny, do you think that becoming a CP has helped you in your career progression?
Yeah, definitely. I think, like I said, starting out, and for me, and I know you said it's obviously not a ladder, but it's obviously trying to gauge where the baseline is, where are you, and it's also sometimes looking at what responsibilities that you're currently doing, and translating that into the Sophia model. I think a lot of times us as IT people probably just get about it and do the work, and don't realize those type of things are different levels. We just think, oh, like you said, I've unboxed a computer and built it. That's not really a level, is it? It's just me doing my job. So I think that's really helped me in that sense, because I was able then to sort of then look at where I wanted to go. As you say, Henry, we all have different aspirations, but I think knowing where I was or where I was at the time sort of did help. So, yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Johnny. Does anyone else have any more questions? I guess I have one, Henry. For those who, I guess, are starting out on their journey and they want to progress, is it probably, say, for example, a first-year graduate, the advice from you would be, for example, to aspire to getting the CT first and then move towards a CP later, or to work a little longer in the field to get a CP once you've got more experience up your sleeve?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of milestone statements. So what I always talk about with ACS is that, even though we've got over 43,000 members, we're all not in the same level of where we are in our careers. So
Right.
I always talk about ACS as being what we call a cradle to grave approach. Not to say that we have people joining up as soon as they're born, but we have a lot of people who are very new to IT, and their requirements are typically more like a sponge, because they're looking at, how do I learn more about Cisco? How do I learn more about Palo Alto? How do I learn more about ITIL? So you tend to find that the type of resources they want from the ACS website would be our digital library. If they are going to ACS events, the branch forums are really important, but they tend to do things, for example, like go to Toastmasters, because a lot of people, particularly where English is not the first language, public speaking scares the hell out of them. So going to those type of events and engaging with ACS is really important. Once you've had 1 or 2 years under your belt, that's a really good way of actually benchmarking where you are and your first milestone. And that's where the certified technologist potentially can come in, because a lot of the work that you do is BAU, business as usual. So you may not even know that you're actually you may be actually working at a higher level of proficiency without even realizing it.
Yep.
And that's actually what Johnny talked about as well.
That's right.
So yeah, I
Good
absolutely...
for a pay rise too, I imagine, when you get to that. He was like, actually, I'm at this level.
Yeah, and it does, it actually does surprise a lot of people, because a lot of people do underestimate or understate their skills, and a lot of people don't even mention the skills because they think, oh, that's just what I do.
That's right.
and brush it off without actually realizing that actually is a key responsibility. But to go back, as I said, that by engaging with ACS and actually utilizing the networking opportunities, the special interest groups, the branch forums, the digital content, great way of actually building up your knowledge and doing the CT is there, and then they make that determination: do I continue a technical career, or do I move it into a more technical, strategic, or even a non-technical pathway through project management or business analysis, etc. So that's where we can actually help out from an ACS standpoint.
Thank you. We have another question in here from Henry Ubaza Unu. Sorry, Henry, I can't pronounce your last name, so I'm not going to attempt it. So I'm just going to say Henry. He says, I will be rounding up my master's degree in networking next month. I need to know what it will take me to be in the cybersecurity aspect of ICT without any experience in ICT.
So Henry, first thing, just by having the name itself, I would love to actually certify you already, just because of the name. But no, again, the cybersecurity specialism, in all seriousness, is for people who have actually worked in information security and cybersecurity. So you might have all the book knowledge, but we're actually looking for people with practical application. From the other Henry, go to the information age, have a look at, I can't remember the actual tab, but it's Spotlight or something series. But anyway, you'll actually find there's a whole segment of profiles of people who are actually working in cybersecurity or ACS members and what they're actually doing. Have a look at those. Henry, when you're at that point where that's where I'm at my career, that's where we actually want to welcome you and actually look at getting you assessed against that certification.
Yep.
Okay. Any more questions? Okay. Thank you, Henry says. Henry, another one from me. If someone wants to apply to be certified, what's the best thing for them to do? Well, you're more than welcome to talk to us here in the Queensland office and we can answer any questions. Of course, will be escalated up to Henry after we speak with you. But you are also more than welcome to speak with Henry direct too. Is that right, Henry, or just?
That's exactly right. And Carla, you answering your own question there.
I am, aren't I?
Yeah, look, absolutely. A couple of things. If you're already currently certified, like a CT, you can still apply online to apply for a CT and CP upgrade. If you're currently not certified, you can go straight to the website as well. This website is very prescriptive and actually will walk you through the documentation that's required. But again, if you have any questions, feel free to contact myself because we've got a whole range of frequently asked questions and documentation around certification to assist you.
I've got one more question here, Henry, from Rupert. Johnny, with growth in public risks in ICT and cybersecurity, do you think ACS certifications will grow in importance to governments and clients?
Yeah, definitely. I think obviously, I think we just touched on that there. Obviously having the technical certifications, and there's quite a lot on there. And as Henry has said, the masters and all those things. But I think there's also there's a different type of cybersecurity is so vast, like all of IT, and we need to have certain standards. And I think with the ACS providing the trust and certifying people that there's not just a technical ability, but there's also other soft skills with communicating, security strategies or even identifying proper risks in different type of organizations. I think having those levels there will really play a major part going forward. And just like I think we've touched on it before with accountants, they have CPAs. And there's a lot of places where, that CPA is a level and a trusted level. I think same with us in IT.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Johnny. Any more questions that need to come through, please send them through. Otherwise, we're just going to... okay, there's one from Karen. Henry, don't forget to remind people about ongoing PD to retain CTCP. That's from Karen. Nice one, Karen.
I can actually touch on this one a little bit here. We need to you need to obviously to retain your certification, need to do some hours where you've actually, and you can do this by attending ACS events. And it's also personal development, or even if you have external training or even training that you're doing yourself in your own time as part of your personal development. that you need to have. Is it 20 hours, is it, or?
It's 20 hours for a certified technologist and 30 hours for a certified professional.
You know, and like we said, there are a lot of events here, and there's also a lot of good information and knowledge on the website at the ACS, which can help you achieve that.
It's true. It's almost like being certified just shows that you're serious to your employers plus clients. It just shows your dedication to keeping up to date and up to speed with everything within your specialization or your area of interest in IT. That's the way I see it.
Yeah, it's very true. Very, very true. Any other questions? But to Karen, actually, and I know who that Karen is, by the way, thank you very, very much. It's actually something that I didn't want to, I suppose, confuse the actual audience in relation to it, but there actually are continuing professional development requirements to maintain your certification. So, yeah, so well answered. And it's not just ACS events, although we welcome you to actually be engaged with ACS, but really anything, whether it's a training course, whether it's going on conferences, etc., they're all valid for your CPD activities. Yeah. Okay,
I think another question has just come through. Hang on, I'll just go to the right one. Okay. Okay, this is from David. I was told that we can use this webinar towards our PD requirements. How do we do this? I'm not sure this one is towards your PD requirements because it's not actual training. It's just information about CPCD. So am I right in saying that, Henry?
Yeah, I wouldn't classify it as actually, as an auditor, I wouldn't classify it because it's just really about information. If this had been like a technical knowledge transfer, absolutely. But it's 1 hour or 40.75 of an hour. So you'll pick that up pretty easily throughout the year.
Yeah. Okay, are there any more questions? No, I think we'll leave it there, Henry. Yeah, thank you so much again, Johnny, for your time.
Not a problem.
And Henry, for you too.
Thank you so much. Yep.
If anyone has any more questions that they want to flick through, please email them to me and I'll flick them through to Henry. If I can answer them, I'll answer them for him. So I don't have to send them through to you, Henry. I'll deal with it. I'll triage it. And please keep an eye out for some other events that are coming up soon. We have our Digital Pulse launch on the 23rd of October with the Minister for Digital Technologies in attendance. So look out online for that event to register and others that are coming up real soon. So Ruba says, thanks, Johnny, Henry, Kylie, excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you again. Enjoy your lunch.
Will do. Thanks so much. Thanks all.
Bye.
Bye.